In a team meeting, it might be, let's start and just check in on a scale of 1 to 10. How do you arrive today? Because the power in that is, as a team, if somebody's a 5, there's somebody else that can lift up that person. Someone else can be a 9. That's been really powerful. And I would say my team expects that now.
Welcome to Corporate Competitor, presented by Forbes Books, the podcast where executives share how the lessons they learned playing sports shaped their leadership. With me for today's episode is Kelli Valade, President and CEO of Denny's Corporation. Kelli's journey in hospitality began when she was just 16 years old, working as a hostess, where she first discovered the power of making guests feel seen. That moment sparked a lifelong love for the industry and a career that's included leadership roles at Chili's, Red Lobster, and Black Box Intelligence. She grew up in New York, played basketball and softball, and brings that same competitive spirit to her leadership today. Kelli, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Don.
I am so looking forward to this. Big fan of Denny's already, but now I'm getting ready to get better. I want to talk first about your childhood because I'm really fascinated. You grew up in upstate New York, played softball, basketball, even a little volleyball. I love the way you described sports for you. You said you love to play it because you're competitive and you love to win. Is there a one of those sports that maybe you would lean into and say taught you the most? Maybe a memory on the field or a court that you still think of today?
You know, it's a great question, Don. I think, so first of all, softball was my game. So softball was the game for me. I played other sports. I wasn't nearly as good or as passionate about the others as I was with softball. So, and I played regularly any chance I could get. So really from spring all the way through the summer. That's what I remember about the summers, actually. Summers for me were playing softball, getting ice cream after, wins, after we won, and just having, that was my community, right? That's what we did as a family. We all went to my softball games. And it was a big part of kind of those formative years for me in terms of just that sport and what it taught me. I was thinking about it today. And I was first in the lineup. I was a pitcher and shortstop, better at shortstop than pitching sometimes. But those were the two positions. And I was first in the lineup, and I wasn't the best hitter, but I was probably consistent. And, the first in the lineup sets the tone for the game in a lot of ways. And so looking back on it, it makes sense now. Reflecting back on it, it makes sense now as to kind of where I was in the lineup, what my role was as team captain at times, usually on the all-star team through the summer. That's why, again, I played all the way through the summer. But again, I didn't have the most home runs. I didn't have, the best record, but consistently was sought out to kind of lead. Even then, I do remember that about playing and enjoying playing.
Is there a story, a memory of from the field of you leading and of your leadership maybe mattering in a way that you might remember?
Gosh, so long ago, but I think I do think temperaments. And there were times I remember a time where we had the woman's name. I can remember it just like that today as I was thinking about this. The woman's name was Kim, and she was the powerhouse hitter. And I remember always wanting to make sure everything we did would set her up, right? She was either the third or the fourth in the lineup. And so, again, I was just always really clear on my role in that. And my role in, again, setting tone with the team, keeping us balanced, setting the strongest players up for success. So I remember one game where literally when all the stars aligned, and I think she might have had 4 or 5 home runs in that game. And it wasn't about me, but it was about us coming together as a team. So the camaraderie, the community of it, and winning's fun. So I remember, those were great, great times. If we went to get ice cream after and we didn't win, not so fun,
No,
but
it doesn't taste the same.
It does. Yeah, it doesn't taste the same. Exactly. Yeah.
So I love that because I love to listen to leaders like you talk about, you were clear on your role. You weren't always the best, but you were consistent. You set up strong players for success. I mean, every bit of what you're describing there, you're talking about from a softball field. But the truth
Mhm.
is, where you're sitting today, every one of those phrases could be just as equally applied.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so in that way, would you say that some of what that window of time in your life was formative in getting you ready for even some of the things that you become?
I think probably so. And who knew back then, right? Because I'm talking, like that story that I just shared is probably, I was probably 12, so we're talking absolutely formative years to your point. And
But I
who knew?
noticed you didn't throw a number out there as to how many years ago it was, but that's cool. That's good.
We'll leave that out. I'm
I
sure I'll
believe that
step
out.
up later and tell you how many years ago. But yeah, so definitely formative years, and that thread that carried through with athletics in school, whether it was just um, phys ed, right? Like just phys ed, or the extracurricular activities tied to some of the competitions that happened in elementary and middle school. And I remember my coach there and the advice given there, and the same thing applies. Consistent. I was a good athlete. I wasn't the absolute best athlete. But I remember it from my coach and my gym coach as much as I do even the softball coach. The same themes applied.
Well,
So
it's such a great there's a powerful lesson there. Consistency travels, right?
yeah,
It doesn't
yes,
matter if people know what to expect from you,
sure.
boy, there's incredible value in that.
Yes, yes. And the coach, and I think it might have been elementary school, either that or middle, but the coach that came to mind, and I could see his face. There was this one specific moment. I think the other thing that it pulled through for me was I didn't give up easily, and there was this moment where there was this weird competitive sport. I can't even describe it now. It was kind of flag football, but on an individual level, and it was myself and this other my arch nemesis, who was always paired with me or against me rather, right, because we were the stronger of the two, the strongest of the two young women. And I remember being we tied so many times. We just kept tying each other because it ended up we were the last ones. We'd be the last ones in this, whatever the game was even called. And the coach just kept saying, all right, we're starting again. I'm like, got to be a sudden death, something going on. Like, is there something we can do here? And it was like, no. And so from that, I remember like it just kept going till one of us won. It was not going to end in a draw, and he was not going to let that end in a draw. And I remember that to this day as well. So keep going,
Wow.
just keep
Don't
going. Yeah,
keep going, don't give up. That is
yeah,
just that's so powerful.
yeah.
Was there a you've already mentioned Kim and you mentioned a coach.
Hmm.
Was there a someone that you would look to and think of as a really important influence in that journey? Maybe it could have been a family member, it could have been a coach, just somebody all these years later that their investment in you
Sure.
was meaningful.
Yeah, it would probably be that coach. It was probably that coach because I remember that example, that memory. I was absolutely exhausted. Yeah, absolutely exhausted. We're young again. We're doing this game that was a big deal, like ribbons involved, whatever. But I remember being absolutely exhausted. I remember the look in his eyes. I remember him saying, "We're not done until somebody wins." So I'd say he was the most influential, and he was in incredible shape. So you didn't wonder if he could do what you were doing, so the the example was there too in how he conducted himself. And this is childhood sports, right? He's the coach at an elementary school. So
No,
definitely.
but and that's really amazing, that idea of, for a lot of people, that memory of that would have been, yeah, and so I realized if I had to do it again, I'm exhausted. I'm just gonna give up.
Yeah.
That's not your memory.
No,
No?
no.
No? Did you win?
I may remember the exhaustion more than the win. I think I did. I think I did. I think I did, but I may have remembered the process more than actually winning or losing. Isn't that funny?
Wow.
Yeah.
But by the way, again, another valuable point,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Sometimes success or failure is defined differently,
Yeah.
but how we chase it is
Yeah.
ours to define.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, but then as you get a little bit older, you start working as a hostess, right? In a what restaurant was it?
A good old TJ's Big Boy, right
TJ's
in
Big Boy.
in
Oh my
Syracuse,
gosh.
New York. Yep.
Long before that became famous in Austin Powers, right?
That's right. Long
That's
before that.
long
Yes.
before that.
Yeah.
But you said the importance of making every guest feel valued was something that you learned right there at 16 years old.
Mhm.
And that beliefs remained a cornerstone of your leadership and who you are today. Is there a moment in those early days where you remember making someone feel valued, or you remember being praised for making someone feel valued that really stuck with you? Like, boy, I'm not just serving food. I'm part of
Mhm.
someone's day.
I'm part of someone's day. That's exactly it. And I take it and have since taken it from beyond value to being seen, right? And so what I learned at that early age, what I can still remember, the gentlemen and women lined up at the counter. I can remember one in particular that came in every single day that came to very clearly be seen, right? The coffee was as good as any place else probably, but he was a regular. He came to feel seen. He came to be connected, feel connected. When I went to buy my first car and had trouble with it, he came out in the parking lot and was showing me, how to handle myself in this new car. So I remember the connection went way beyond me pouring coffee for this gentleman, right? And again, to this day, I remember his name. I often wonder what has happened to him. But I think in the equal part to the question you raised, did someone tell me connect that way? No, it just felt so powerful that I got to have this really great job where I made a lot of great money, right? I'm 16 and I hostess first, but then I quickly became a server, which was in large part to someone saying, the managers there saying, hey, you can do more. I do remember that first manager saying to me, wow, you have grasped this whole serving thing really quickly. We see potential in you, but you could smile a little bit more. You could smile a little bit more. You could relax a little bit more. And so that permission of, hey, see others, see them for why they're here. Take a minute. And efficiency is great, but this is about hospitality. And I don't know if they use that word. This is about hospitality, but I do remember they're saying lighten up a little bit because I was so intent on being fast, and it was a fast-paced environment. So I remember being coached in that way, and then also told pretty quickly thereafter of the potential I had, if I wanted to take advantage of the opportunities afforded to me in that restaurant.
This gentleman who came to be seen, right? But who also, but then you delivered on that, right? Because there are a lot of folks who show up at a restaurant every day or show up at a restaurant often enough, and they just kind of melt into the background. You have to be forthcoming to try to draw people out
Sure,
and to make
sure.
sure. Was there a way that you began conversations? Was there something that you did specifically to make sure they felt seen?
I think, Don, the power of it was just in the fact that, and I say this a lot as someone now running a brand with over 1,500 locations, the power in it is just um, the potential in making those connections. I say it all the time in a world that's disconnected, right? And ever more all the time. Restaurants are a place like around the table where people can come to connect. They come for more than food. They are typically there are times they're celebrating, or there are times that you see people that are alone. And everybody's got some kind of story and some kind of reason for being there. For me, that environment also happened at a time when I was being raised by a single mom. I was helping out and bringing money home to our family at that time, and so it was a bit of a escape for me and a bit of a second family that happened for me there. So it was all just there by example, if you will, right? The way that all the managers, it wasn't, you're here for work and there's no crossing the lines into kind of the rest of your life. It was a big community and a family. And again, I often now say to people, if we can't, with the way the world is today, people's first jobs have the potential to have this kind of profound impact on them. That's the beauty of restaurants, right? You could start at 16 and you can be doing what I'm doing several years later if you just kind of lean into it and embrace
Several years later. I like it. You're
several.
still working. You're working the number. You're working. Um,
Yes.
I love it, but what I think is so cool is you're right. I mean, my first job was in a restaurant as well, and and I was just a busboy. But I remember, if you get a chance and you're conversational and you're willing to
Huh?
to begin the conversation, because sometimes people
Right.
don't, especially you really you find an awful lot that you
Sure.
can enjoy with other people.
Yep.
You know,
Absolutely.
um, listen to a podcast that you were on in which you talked about being adopted, raised by a single mom, you talked about, and how that shaped you. Um, how did that upbringing influence the way you lead today and maybe the way you support others,
Mhm.
even see others today?
I think for me, there was so much of it that was hard for my mom at the time. And so again, getting this job and having some money that that was my own, but also, the responsibility. I felt a lot of responsibility, good, bad, or indifferent at times, felt a lot of responsibility. As the oldest, so I was adopted, but then there were they had two biological children after they adopted me. So uh, I remember feeling responsible a lot as the oldest. And I liked that responsibility, but at times I didn't, I at times wished I could just kind of, do my thing, make the cash on the weekends, um, and focus, or maybe just not worry. And so for me, what that created, I'm pretty darn scrappy. You can go back to the don't like to lose, not going to give up, but I'm really scrappy. And I also watched my mother's example was an example nonetheless of I wanted to make sure I had my own stuff, going to college then. By the way, being helped by the managers in that same restaurant, they helped me see that I should go to college. And I kid you not, there was a group of us. Again, we all became friends. There were shift leads and managers. There was a group of us, and there were several of us in that restaurant getting ready to go to college. I was going to do a 2-day or 2-year rather vocational school, and there were people there that said, you should think about you're not thinking about college. That's crazy. You should think about that. There was a group when we all started working on how to fill out financial aid forms, how to handle some of those things. I don't know that I would have known how to do it. And my family was not encouraging me to even go to college. So that inspiration also came from, as crazy as that sounds, that inspiration came from the people I was around in that first job. And so it taught me, I think, the relationship I had with my mom, so much respect for the weight of it for her. But also I got really scrappy wanting to have my own stuff. So going to college, it was a means to an end, right? I thought, all right, well, if this gives me independence, if this gives me my own stuff, great. Later on is I think when I learned I had something to say, or that people might follow me, or I had these leadership capabilities that I could take on different things. But it was a bit of a means to an end in the beginning of go to college, have, a way to pay off loans, have what you need.
I love it, and I mean, I can hear Scrappy. I can hear Scrappy in the voice. It's awesome. You know, you've said in a previous interview that your hero was your biological father, someone that you actually found through 23andMe, right? One of those genetic sites, and how fitting it is that he owns an Italian restaurant, right? So that now you actually spend some Sundays helping him make meatballs, right?
Mhm.
Um, how is reconnecting, and maybe tell us a story of reconnecting with him and
Sure.
how that happened.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite stories to tell. I actually think I am supposed to tell this story. If you give me a platform, I'll tell the story because it's what I just spoke to in learning in that first job about the power of seeing others and the power in being vulnerable and allowing yourself to be seen, which I think I was doing both of those things early on. Probably didn't know it and didn't capture it the same way as I do now. But if I go back, and this goes back almost 8 years ago now, my son, Christian, was doing a family tree project for school. And we have all sorts of information on my husband's side of the family. His mother was Danish. She came to the United States once she was married. He has tons of cousins, uncles, relatives still in Denmark. And my son has always associated very strongly with the Danish side. And for me, I was adopted. So my son came to me and said, we really don't know anything. And I said, well, that is true. We know the family that raised me. We know about them. He said, but that's not that's not your genetics. That's not real. Aren't you curious? And I had been curious at different times in my life. There'd be moments and a longing a little bit. And I actually knew I was adopted when I was probably somewhere between 8 and 10 years old. My mom told me, and I felt good about it. She said, your parents were in high school. They wanted you to have a family. They wanted you to have a home. And so I felt good about it. But you also, though, being adopted, you never actually, there's a void, right? Whether I wanted to admit it or I felt it every single day, there's a void because no one ever really looks like you. And I was adopted into an Italian family and really close with my grandmother. And those Italian traditions also really formative for me, right? The love of bringing family around a table. You cook with love. So really made a huge impact on me, but I really didn't look like anyone other than dark hair, dark eyes. You don't go to the doctors and they'll ask you every time, do you have a history of heart disease, cancer? You say, I have no history. And over time, I started to think, I get it. I had my mom did an incredible job making me feel very grounded in how she described it. But I did wonder, where are you now? How come no one has tried to find me now? And so I kept that to myself, but probably didn't do such a great job of hiding it. Again, if you can't tell, I'm kind of an open book and kind of wear my emotions and heart on my sleeve. And I'm pretty demonstrative. That's the Italian part. But I truly didn't know more than what my adoptive parents had told me. And so my son encouraged me. I went to work the next day. My team at work, again, we blended life and work and career and family. We were one big family. And I was at Chili's at that time as the chief operating officer of the brand. And my team and I, around the water cooler, we're talking about our weekends and I'm telling the story. The very next day, that 23andMe kit, they bought it and they put it on my desk and said, would you just go and find out your heritage? These kits now this is almost 8 years ago. So these were kind of new back then. And they're not what they are today with how many people have taken them. And so back then it was really, I was doing it because they bought it for me. But I also was doing it to find out about my heritage. In a million years, I promise you, I never imagined anything more would come of it other than it might map my just specific heritage and tell me if I was Italian. Spit in the tube, send the thing away. And 2 weeks later, it comes in and it's a Sunday morning and my husband's sitting next to me and I open the app and I say, oh my goodness, my results are here. And I pause and I'm staring at it. And my husband said, oh my gosh, children, she's not Italian. The worst has happened. What's going to happen next? And it wasn't that. It was that it actually was matching me with a relative that had 22% shared DNA in the database. So what took me aback was the fact that there was someone in there that had this.
You had a relative.
Yeah,
right.
Which I couldn't wrap my head around it. Thought, I don't have any DNA relatives. I don't have any. How could this be? And as it turned out, it was my birth mother's sister who, as a hobby, studied genealogy and put herself in all the databases. And so lucky for me, I pinged her. You could instant message. And her response was within an hour. I think I know who you are. And you are my sister's daughter that she gave for adoption. Yeah. Yeah. So the rest, as they say, I would say is history, but it was a beautiful and the most overwhelming thing that has ever happened to me in my life. And I met them within 3 weeks.
You met both your father and mother?
Yep, both of them. They had stayed connected. They had stayed friendly over the years, even going to their high school reunions together. And of course, I was what they still had in common. And so they had remained connected. So once I found one, I found the other and brought them both in, one at one, gate, picked the other up at another gate. And we spent the weekend together. By the end of the weekend,
in South Carolina there?
In Dallas. This is in Dallas.
Oh, because you're with
at
Chili's.
the time.
Right.
Yeah. And we spent the weekend together. You want to talk about all in. That's the other thing. I think about me, there was no halfway. There was no low key approach to it. It was, we're going all in. My poor family, they were like, do we hug them when they show up? I was like, I don't know. I can't think straight, see straight. It was really an emotional time. It was a beautiful
I
time.
would bet it had to be emotionally just overwhelming.
It was incredibly overwhelming. Found out very quickly I look a lot like him. I look like my birth mother as well. There was so much forgiveness that they expected needed to happen, and it wasn't that for me. It was very clear quickly, and especially with my father, who's been through a lot, that they regretted it. He wished they had done it differently. He didn't know that I'd ever been told. So the whole, why did anyone think of looking for me? In his minds, they had given up that right, and he was never going to, he was never going to choose to invade my privacy or my life. And that was the story. Probably I'd waited. Here you go, Don, 47 years to hear. So at 47, I found who I looked like, who I acted like. We have the same mannerisms. We have this similar personality.
Isn't that amazing? You think about the power of genetics, right?
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
you never once walked in their path. You never once that you know of, would have hung out with them or even seen them, and yet you still, yeah.
I mean, crazy. Like, people in the very beginning, you'd almost draw crowds of people that would see us and just sit back and just watch us and say, my goodness. Yeah. The likeness, but the mannerisms, that's the part that's fascinating. You can have the same physical traits, but the mannerisms and the way we talk and act, that's the part that was just fascinating. But by the end of that weekend, it was incredibly awkward and awesome and uncomfortable and just incredibly emotional. But we made meatballs and sauce. We combined our recipes, the first of many times. And we've done it a million times over now. And we made way more meatballs than we could count, but it's our thing. It's the thing that people want to be around us to do, to watch us make meatballs together in our kitchen and serve our family. So yes, it has been an amazing blessing and gift.
Before we continue, I want to remind you that if one of your 2025 goals is writing a book, but you don't know where to start, I'm here to help. In my new role as publisher at Forbes Books, I'm working alongside a world-class team to guide aspiring authors like you through the process of getting published. Whether it's a story, a big idea, or a project close to your heart, now's the time to make it happen. Just visit forbesbooks.com/Don to get started. In leadership, people often think you have to project strength and certainty, right? I'm this and but as you said, if you're meant to tell the story, this is a story of vulnerability.
That's right.
But you're also sharing that vulnerability can be a strength, not a weakness.
Absolutely. So there lies the exact point of the story, because my whole world blew wide open, and I now have these beautiful blessings, both of them in my life, and a half brother and so many other relatives, because in a lot of ways, I don't think I thought at the time, I wasn't holding a sign up that said I need to be found or I have a void. But because I allowed myself to be seen, because I talked about perhaps that void once or twice, my whole life and world changed because of it, that gift. And then when I started to talk about it, I literally got on a stage and talked to 1,000 general managers 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, with the help of that same team. They
gave you the test.
The same team that bought me the test. We were ready to do our general managers conference at Chili's at the time, and I got on stage and talked about it. And what I've learned is it's not just an adoption story. It is just exactly what you said. It's about showing your vulnerability, and in turn, what appears and many would think is a weakness, it is now a towering strength for me. And then in that, I found the story I was supposed to be telling, and the story that I should continue to tell, because of not only what I get back, but I've had people say I called my mom that I haven't spoken to in 10 years. It breaks things wide open by showing that vulnerability can truly become a strength. But the amount of people that came to me, I general managers, strong, general managers, male and female. There was one that just literally almost collapsed in my arms, from that conversation, from what it did and what it, the memories it brought up for that person. And it didn't stop there. I would go into restaurants and go to do restaurant visits, and someone would say, I've heard of your story, and can I tell you about mine? And what a beautiful, like, isn't that what it's all about? And I get to keep doing it. And I'm truly so honored that you would ask about it. And then I get to keep talking about this just beautiful chapter.
I've heard your story. Can I tell you about mine? Wow. That is exactly what's, I mean, maybe the height of leadership is being open enough, vulnerable enough that someone can walk in and actually say those words to you. What a goal for all of us as leaders, to be the kind of people that others would walk in and maybe in some cases fall into your arms, but in other cases just look you in the eye and share a story.
Sure. Right. And I think I do genuinely come at it from a, um, tell me what I don't know. If I don't know, I'll say it, to the point you made. And I think that's valuable. Now, you don't want everybody to think, well, she's just constantly saying, what does everybody else know? You want, I can be decisive. I can be pragmatic. And when there is a goal, we are all marching. I can help people see the end that we're trying, what we're trying to achieve as a team. I think that helps a tremendous amount. I've often said leaders also have to help you see around the corner. So if we do this, if we make these decisions, if we start winning, if these strategies work, here's what it means for all of us. So I think there's this way of just really kind of leveling and aligning with the team that always has to happen for me first. It may feel like it slows things down, but it always has to happen first. And then you got to show everybody what happens when you hit the mark.
Right. And there you want to first show what happens from a macro standpoint. Here's what happens to us collectively.
Mm-hmm.
But then do you also share with them, here's what happens to you individually if you hit the mark?
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What happens for all of us individually? Like I often talk about bringing your whole self. So what does that mean for all of us in terms of not just what happens here in this office, but how does that affect your family? What's your why, right? I know my team's why. I know their collective why, and I know their individual why.
You had a great example where you don't walk into a meeting and you don't look at somebody and say, how are you? You're more specific. How's your mom doing? How's your daughter? Right? You know people enough to know their why and to know what it is that drives them in conversation. How do you get there's a lot of HR people who probably listen to this and freaking out like, oh my gosh, I don't want people talking about all these things. But
Yeah.
but how do you engage those conversations in a way that makes it meaningful?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, the organization, like I think I've leaned towards and chosen assignments where I knew, because there are some organizations where that wouldn't be okay, right? It would be, there's a separation. I've never believed that, going back to that first job where we were a family and we were together socially, after work, before work, all that. So I just grew up with that at Breaker International, growing up there for 22 years. That's exactly how Norman Breaker led, and Doug Brooks, who followed him. And it was, and I learned a lot from leaders that would stop and ask you about yourself before they even asked you about the assignment or the work that was ahead. I'm a work in progress. I have to step back and really make sure that no matter how intense things get, or I can be impatient, how impatient I feel, that I am still being true to what's the experience I want to create for this person today? What's the belief I want them to hold about how I'm showing up for them today? The work is the work, but the other stuff's what brings us all here as well. So you have to be mindful of it. And even in the hardest or most pressure cooker times, have to make sure you're still trying to live by that. I don't always do it. I absolutely would say, when pressured, I'll skip to, we're on to the third or fourth question.
Let's get to what's going to happen today and what your role in that needs to be. But
I tend to, sorry.
No, go ahead. I love that you were modeled. Some of that was modeled for you, and that's what you took away from that modeling. Norman Brinker was a hard charger. I mean, there was nothing. I mean, scrappy and some of these words you've used to describe yourself, I think are all etched on the sides of his tombstone.
Absolutely. And a fierce competitor, right? Anybody that knows anything about his story as an Olympian, like anything about him, they know fearless, an amazing leader. When he would walk through the halls, and I had this amazing encounter with him at 24, 25 years old, where he wanted to know, I had an engagement ring on. He wanted to know if my fiance was worthy of me. They were at the
What a
time.
great way to ask that question. Don't tell me,
Right.
like, did you get engaged this weekend? No. He's like, is he worthy
Yeah,
of you? That's
yeah.
great.
And I'm thinking, how do you know who's worthy of what? Like, because I didn't know him that well. But what a fascinating! I remember thinking that was the most fascinating question ever. But he didn't ask me what I did for the company. He didn't ask me anything about that. It was all about my personal life and what brought me there, what made me happy, and if my fiance was worthy of me. It's just fascinating. So what I tend to do today's is at times wellness check. I'll say wellness check with a check mark next to it. How are you today? There's also this little trick we do on my team.
And when you say that, this is a question that you're sending out as a note, a note, or is
Could
this
be a text, could be a text, could
right?
be live and in person. In a team meeting, it might be, let's start and just check in on a scale of 1 to 10. How do you arrive today? Because the power in that is, as a team, if somebody's a 5, there's somebody else that can lift up that person. Someone else can be a 9. And that's been really powerful. And I would say my team expects that now. Like we've got each other, we've got each other's backs that way too.
You mind if I dig into that one for a second?
Sure.
So, how long does it take? I would guess if I'm walking in, you're a new boss, and your question is scale of 1 to 10. How are you arriving today? Like it's going to take me a little while to get off a 10, like, cause I want to make you think I'm a 10 all the time. How long does it take for people to actually get to a point of honesty?
Oh, I don't know. Pretty quick. It's my experience. It's been pretty quick. It's how you set it up. I have my CFO at one point said, well, to me, there's no 10 and there's no 1. So you have to get back. You have to first unpack people's own, what they put on that, what their own definition is. And so there's a little bit of, all right, so let's say it can't be a 10 because nobody's probably a 10 on any given day. That's a good rule. Let's throw out 10s. So what you start to do things like that, you go last so that it kind of unpacks itself in the room, but not long is what I have observed. And I think it goes back to a little bit of, let's just all talk about what we need to do together.
But if somebody says 5, do you
Mhm.
stop and say, you mind, do you ask anything beyond that?
Yeah. Yeah. We usually would come with, I'm a 5 today because of this. And it could be work or personal or both. And usually both are included. And then the 5 becomes, how could we help you be higher than a 5? And then there's a very honest conversation. It can take a long time and it can also go really quickly.
Wow. But so the advice you would give other leaders, because that's one of the things we'd love to do here, is those wellness checks seem to be important to you, and you set out to do those in a very authentic way. What was the setup? I'm sorry, I'm like so fascinated by this. Like I'm going to steal this. I actually can see myself doing this myself. But
I love that.
give me like what's the setup? How do you begin that process?
I think some of it actually, I probably was doing it without it being categorized as a wellness check, if you will, that came out of COVID. And so I think kind of normalizing it or just really recognizing then who didn't need someplace to go and just say, today I am struggling. So I think perhaps if I look back, there had been a way I'd done it in the past, but it really became kind of formalized then and then just carried that forward. I was at Red Lobster for a short time. And when I joined, I was doing my first one-on-one with the COO there. And I said, so how are you? And it was just our first one-on-one. And he said, I'm good. I'm working on this. Labor's not good enough. The sales still haven't come back post-COVID. We were still in the middle of COVID at that time, but this hasn't happened. I'm working on, and he just had because he thought that's what I meant. And I said, no, actually, how are you? How are you? I can only imagine because the restaurant folks like him were the front line in the pandemic. And I said, I cannot imagine what you have been through in the last year and a half. And he played that back every chance he could to anyone that wanted to know what it was like to work with me or what it unlocked for him in the way of leadership. So that's the keep doing it when you get that kind of a response and it gets played back that way. And then the answers sound different. You only got to tell that story once.
Right. No, I love it. You know, you made reference earlier to the Chili's, the playbook, and trying to go back to your roots and things like that. When there are a lot of companies, a lot of great leaders out there, have different ways of scouting their competitors. Right.
Mhm.
We've had a couple on this podcast who have talked about actually, grabbing a group of their senior executives and going and have a meal in the competitor's restaurant, right?
Absolutely.
Whatever it is,
Mhm.
looking for ways to keep ahead. How have you used scouting to your advantage
Mhm. Mhm.
as a leader? And maybe tell me a story.
I think, look, I'm guilty of and do the same things you just heard about going to competitors' restaurants, having a meal together, taking the team, going out to our own restaurants, and then hitting a market, and then hitting some of the major competitors, and to see what they're doing or see how it's executed. Or, I mean, I know about just because I make it my business to understand what everyone else is doing. You have to. I also stay really well networked. And I
Mhm.
know a lot of CEOs. We've all kind of come up through the business together in many ways. And it's a really small industry. It's very big, but very small. And so I know I can see what others are going through. And as an example or a story, just recently called another CEO and said, are you seeing some of the same things that have happened, in this first quarter of the year? How is it playing out for you? What can you share? And as a public company, you're running a public company, you have to be really careful, but you can find ways to really understand how others are addressing some of the same challenges. And so having that network and then having people that you can talk to that are in a similar position um, is is priceless, is incredibly important. So yeah, scouting and knowing who's doing what. And then I'm a fan of watching. I've always been a student of this industry. So when a new CEO takes over and they create a turnaround plan, I'm fascinated. Did I create the same approach here with the same urgency? If I had to do it again, what did I learn from that other CEO that just took over something similar, and then if I can get in a room with that person, I'm going to ask those questions.
Right. Trying to figure out what did they do that really
Yeah.
made a difference. And
Yes.
you said something almost at the beginning of that answer. You said that if you're in a market with some of your team, um, you don't just go to your competitors, and that's always good. But every once in a while, you'll just, and I assume without telling anybody who you are, right? Assuming they don't know,
Mhm.
you show up at one of your own restaurants
Absolutely.
and just kind of scout your own behaviors.
Absolutely.
What have you learned, or maybe what's changed in scouting your own behaviors?
Harder. It gets harder to go in and not have anybody.
The longer you are, the more times you show up in.
Absolutely, it gets a little
Right,
more difficult. I went in. We just opened a Kiki's Breakfast Cafe, our other brands,
right.
small but mighty brands, and we
From
opened in
Orlando, right?
Dallas. They're based in Orlando. Yeah, it
Yep.
was founder led, purchased right after I joined. This acquisition
Got it.
happened for us, and so we've taken that little brand to great places already. Multiple states. From one state it had never been out of Florida to now 8 states, and we opened in Dallas. And I was there on a Thursday for a regular visit to talk to the teams, see the beautiful opening. It had opened the day before. Had a great meal. Was there with the president of Kiki's, our president Dave Schmidt, and then I came back in with my husband on Saturday, with the baseball hat on.
Ah,
Um, you know,
undercover boss.
and only because it was Saturday and I didn't feel like putting makeup on. I really wasn't trying to be incognito. I figured they probably wouldn't recognize or notice me anyway. And it took almost to the very end before they did. But what I got to do, um, as I was listening and looking at the guests that were around me, my husband did it with me. My husband's in the industry. He's on more the liquor side of it. He sells Tito's So he's been alongside this journey with me for a very long time. We've been together for almost 32 years.
Awesome.
And my husband started leaning over, and when people sat down, he's like, "Hey, where did you find out about this place?" And the couple next to us to this side said, "Oh, we're driving by." And then at one point I leaned over and asked the same question, or "How's your food so far? This place is amazing." Right. So, and we weren't trying to kind of BS anybody. We were naturally just trying to find out what other people were thinking. And then I walked up to the management team at the end and said, "I've been sitting over there in the corner. You guys are doing an amazing job." Right. So,
That's awesome. That's great. Scouting always fascinates me. And again, it works in almost every industry and all of us need to be
sure.
doing it. But that idea of kind of keeping our antenna up, not just, but too often the focus is always external. Sometimes the scouting
Sure.
needs to be like, what are we doing? And what are
Yeah.
our habits? What are the things that everybody knows we're going to do if suddenly revenue is down? Are we always going to run,
Well, and how's
for,
the guest really being treated? How's the guest really?
right.
Because you will never get an unfiltered experience if everyone knows you're showing up. And I tend to walk into a location also when I am doing those visits, and it's really important. Let me talk to a guest. Show me your regulars, and let me go. Just let me go, and then strike up a conversation. How long have you been coming here? Why do you come here? And just be able to thank them, and then usually buy their meal, and as a thank you to them for being so loyal to the brand. So that's fun too.
Kelly, I like I'm over the moons over Miami.
Look at
I,
you.
I'm over the moon for
Oh,
this
I love it.
amazing conversation,
My favorite
and
dish.
mine too. It
Awesome.
is mine.
Yay.
We have a Denny's right down the street from our house, and so I'm grateful for the time together. Grateful for the opportunity to learn from you, and I thank you today for being a corporate competitor with us.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it.
She is so much fun and so many nuggets. Limiting him to three was really difficult. But here are my three greatest takeaways from today's conversation with Kelly. The first was that whole discussion around what she saw when she was 16 years old, working as a hostess and then as a waitress in a restaurant, talking about the importance of knowing that people wanted to be seen, and that sometimes just the way she engaged them gave them energy, right? That people want to be seen. But then it grew, right? It grew for her to an understanding that she had to learn to be seen too. But that requires a vulnerability. It requires an openness that not all of us can manage. But when that, how does that work in your leadership? She said vulnerability becomes her strength. It became a skill set to see others, but then let her to open up about her own adoption story and reconnecting with her birth parents, and sharing that story with so many of her employees that they then had a whole different impression of their CEO. Right? I love that line. She said, employees come up to her and say, "I've heard your story, and can I tell you about mine?" People want to be seen. What a power to be able to unlock that in others. How important is that? Then I loved it when she talked about the motto for Denny's. We love to feed people, body, mind, and soul. And what does that look like today in your business? What does that mean for you to think about feeding other people, body, mind, and soul? And she does that by asking the question internally, right, at her own business, at the beginning of every meeting, right, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you arriving today? And I love it. First off, if someone is less than 10, or maybe at 5, the question is, well, what would it take for us? What can we do to help you improve that? Because there might be an answer in there that you collectively can do for other people. But then Kelly always goes last. Really important piece for not hijacking the conversation. Um, you know, ask about the person, then ask about the project. What a perfect fit she was for Denny's culture of feeding the body, mind, and soul. And finally, the third one was, three great parts to her answers about scouting, right? I love talking about how we scout competitors and how does that allow us to know what we might need to adjust in. First off, take your team to your competitors, right? If it's and experience it. Maybe it's trying to order from them online, whatever it might be. Take your team, learn from your competitors, then self scout by visiting your own environment. Right? Have maybe get somebody to call in and try to work through an issue with your company, and maybe your call center isn't quite what you thought it might have been. But then also, she talked about the importance of staying well connected in the industry so that she could call other CEOs, she could call other leaders and say, hey, are you seeing this same challenge that we're facing right now? And if so, is there anything in particular you're doing? That willingness to be open, but only open because she maintained that great relationship, super important. You know, for our YouTube fans, head over to the comments because I want to hear from you. What's the best leadership lesson you've ever learned from a coach, a mentor, a boss? Share it with me. I love to read every comment, and I love to be able to learn from you. Thank you so much today for enjoying Kelli's conversation with me. I appreciate you.